Hello, I'm Gavin, and I'm here to tell you about a very special friend of mine. Now, the story starts quite some time ago on a planet very, very far from here, where there lived a kind and loving bear named Seymour. Some say he was a very serious bear, but actually he was very happy. You might even say that he was seriously happy because he loved what he did. All day he would test things to make sure that they were working properly, and there were a lot of things to test. You see, Seymour's home planet was absolutely full of inventors. Just like on Earth, these inventors were great at coming up with all kinds of ways to make their lives more comfortable, like making heaters to warm their houses, or space rockets to explore the galaxy, or even coming up with the invention to make a knife or a machine that could stop making holes in bread when you spread your butter. You name it, they could invent it. You might as well have called their world Planet Invention, but thankfully someone had come up with a much nicer name. Seymour's planet was called Absolutus Invenio, though most people just called it Invenio. The only problem was, just like on Earth, the machines and things that people invented on Invenio didn't always work properly. Their sleeping pods and their sky cleaners and their bounce cycles and jelly dressers and automatic lint removers all needed fixing quite often to make sure that they were safe. You didn't want your boy's bounce cycle to bounce him off into a tree, or your girl's jelly dress to congeal, get all stuck and hard so she couldn't get out of it. And you wanted your automatic lint remover to remove bits of fluff and not your whole fur. So Seymour would do his checks, and if anything needed fixing, he would set the engineer bears to work. That was their job. Seymour was more than busy enough simply testing and checking. And he was so good at his job that he kept many, many bears safe. In fact, there were a great deal of bears who thought of Seymour as a hero. Invenio was definitely a much safer place because Seymour was around. It also meant that he was a busy bear. Even when he got home, Seymour would check everything and make sure everything was working well so that his wife Lucinda would be safe. Finally then, he would sit back and gently bob up and down on his solar-powered seesaw seat and laugh with Lucinda about the days when his children were young and still living at home. Seymour, you see, was a granddad. In fact, back then, he was 562 years old, and he had 74 beautiful grandchildren who he loved very, very much. So much that every week, and I mean every week, he would have them all over at his house. Now, you could be excused for thinking that it might not be quite safe to have 74 bears around your house at once, but Seymour had found that children are excellent safety assistants. You just have to teach them what they need to know. He found children incredibly clever, too, so it was easy to teach them, and children are so enthusiastic about learning. They love learning, so teaching them is fun. Showing his children all the machines around his house and all the gadgets, Seymour would tell his young bears exactly how to make sure the devices were working properly. They'd check his streamlined sandwich maker at lunchtime, Lucinda's fantastic fur dryer before she had a rainbow makeover, and the unbendable back-rubbing bar before taking turns to have a good old rub. And on sunny days, they'd see that the bubble maker on the fabulous floating froth sprayer was in good condition before having a bubble-tastic blast themselves. Sometimes, the children would even come up with new ways to stay safe that Seymour hadn't even thought of yet. And he'd write those ideas down and share them with the engineer bears at work. Quite often, there was so much safety work, though, that Seymour would complain to his wife that he was only one bear. "Well," said Lucinda while trying out a new knitting nanny machine, "perhaps you need to train some assistants then." It was a brilliant idea, thought Seymour, but all the engineer and inventor bears said they were too busy inventing and making and fixing stuff. In fact, there didn't seem to be a single adult who wanted to help. Then the idea struck him. He knew exactly who he would train to be his safety assistants. His grandchildren, of course. And that's precisely what he did. One day, when he went to work, all the other safety bears were huddled around one of the inventions Seymour liked to call the can't stop staring screen. The big oblong screen was actually called a berry vision, and all the bears were oohing and ahhing at a reporter bear on the news talking about the brand spanking new super stellar space rocket. Everyone was saying how super shiny and super cool the space rocket was, but as a reporter walked around the space rocket, Seymour couldn't help notice all the things that needed testing and checking. "Some bear needs to check that contraption, make sure it's working properly," said Seymour with concern. "Don't worry yourself, Seymour," said one of the other inventors. "They've got the best engineers on the planet to build that rocket. Nothing could go wrong." Seymour didn't agree. Things bears made always needed checking and fixing. Why should a new space rocket be any different? He called the spaceport on his berry phone to tell them what he thought, but they also said he mustn't worry. He told Boss Bear, but he too said the same thing as the rest. "Right," said Seymour with determination. "I might be only one bear, but I need to stop that spacecraft zooming off without being tested." He called Lucinda and asked her to come pick him up at once. "Yes," said Seymour with assurity. "Straight away. Your granddaughters will have to wait to have their hair blow-dried later." When she arrived in their heli-hover car, he took over the driver's seat and off they went to the spaceport. They might have got there faster if Seymour wasn't being so careful about hovering safely. And as it was, he got there just in time. He hovered onto the blastway, stopped, jumped out of the car, grabbed his wife's cordless industrial strength fur dryer from the boot and ran straight for the super stellar space rocket. Lucinda shouting after him, "Do be careful, dear." When the police bears saw Seymour running towards the barrier around the spaceship, they pounced at him. But Seymour simply blew them away with that hairdryer, one after the other, left and right, and carried on towards the spaceship. The countdown to start the engines had already started. Over the speakers, Seymour could hear 5, 4, 3, as he got to the space rocket. 2, 1, but it wasn't too late. Like all good safety bears, Seymour knew where the off switch was. Shoo! The engines didn't start. Seymour ran over to a ladder and climbed up the side of the great spaceship, taking note as he went of all the things that he could see wrong, closely followed by the police bears, of course. By the time he reached the platform outside the main door and started banging on it, they caught him. But before they could drag him off, the rocket captain opened the door and shouted, "Stop! What's going on? And who is this bear? And who turned off my ship?" "I'm Seymour," said the old bear. "I turned off your ship because it's not safe to fly until I've checked everything first." "Well," said the captain, only a little annoyed, "it takes hours to get ready for takeoff, and now that you turned the ship off, well, we'll have to start all over again, which means we'll have to leave tomorrow. So, Seymour, if you can find one thing wrong with this ship, well, I'll let you check the whole thing." "Good," said Seymour. "I've made a list." So, Seymour was put to work checking the shiny new rocket ship, and oh golly, there were loads of things that weren't right. When the water engines were switched on, for instance, Seymour found that the heating system was leaking, and he had to get the engineer bears to fix it so the rocket was free from poisonous gases. For a whole day, Seymour kept those engineers bears hard at work fixing things that needed to work properly for the spaceship to be safe. And when they'd all finished, every bear agreed. Seymour was more than a hero. Heroes save people when accidents happen. Seymour made sure accidents didn't happen at all. After the ship had been thoroughly tested and checked, President Bear himself came over to thank Seymour. "If it weren't for you, a great many bad things could have happened on the journey." "Don't thank me," said Seymour earnestly. "I'm just doing my job." "Of course," said the president. "In fact, I think safety should be your first name. From now on, we shall call you Safety Seymour. And that's why I'm going to give you a new job. You need to join our space mission. Our bears are flying off to distant planets to meet other creatures and to see if they can invent things for them. And we could perhaps do with someone to make sure the ship stays safe, and maybe the other planets can stay safe too," winked the president. "Thank you, President Bear," said Seymour quite seriously, though inside he was very, very happy. "I'll do my best." It has to be said, Safety Seymour was seriously happy in his new job. He got to go to all kinds of cool and crazy planets to test and check their inventions and make sure the things they made were working properly. This meant that while he was on other planets, Seymour needed to train up other safety assistants. Adults were always too busy with other important things, so in the end, of course, it was the clever children that Seymour could count on to teach the adults how to stay safe. Everywhere Seymour went, there were creatures and people who would never forget the magical bear who made their planet an even safer place. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story, and I hope that you'll come back again, join Seymour on another great adventure.